Hello and welcome to the next in my series of lockdown videos. This one I'm going to just walk along the, as we call it, the jail side, and there's a row of trees along this edge of the cemetery border with the prison. So the very first tree is a sycamore which is less than 30 years old. I only know that because I planted the tree next to it is a tiny seedling, which is a beech tree. It's a tree that we haven't looked at so far. You can see the beautiful green leaves. These will darken and become harder as well, but they've only just emerged. So this beech tree, I'd only just planted it, and the next year a seedling of a sycamore started growing nearby, and the sycamore soon outstripped the beech, but the sycamore has split in two to two main trunks, and now the beech tree is actually taller than the sycamore. This is another sycamore, more mature, and it's the typical version with the little bits of bark that have come away, leaving paler patches, and you can see the typical sycamore leaves at the base. I think there's a distant missel thrush singing, and I've heard a blackbird, but there's not a lot of bird song at the moment. And here we have one of the tragedies. This beautiful tree, as it was, is a wych elm. All the trees, the English elms, there are lots of English elms in the cemetery, died in the 1980s, but the beetles must have got fed up and have turned to this wych elm in the last 5 years. So it was still alive, but I'm afraid it has gone now. The tree next to it is a lime. It's in full leaf virtually. Beautiful fresh green colour, and the leaves at the base aren't quite as attractive. They've sort of got brown staining on. This is another tree that grows from suckers, and it's these suckers that sometimes harbour woodcock. If there's a large influx of woodcock in the autumn, the little sprigs at the base of a lime tree are one of the best places to look. Unfortunately, you can see that these have all been cut back, so next autumn I don't think this will be a great place to look for woodcock. Hopefully there's a tree that the people have missed. The next tree is a horse chestnut. So again, this is one of the first trees to come into leaf, and of course in the autumn it's one of the first trees to go brown and lose its leaves. It also goes brown because of the leaf miner moth, which is now attacking these trees. This next tree is a younger sycamore, just starting to come into leaf, so you can see the shape of some of the leaves against the sky. And then we have another mature sycamore. Now this one's behind the others. There's one twig on the left that's coming into leaf, but no sign yet of leaves on the other. The next tree is another horse chestnut. Now this one is in full flower, so I'll just focus on that. We call these candles, and you can see the very distinctive leaves as well. Horse chestnuts aren't native to the UK, so they do look a bit outlandish, these enormous flowers that horse chestnuts have. And this is the base of the horse chestnut. Listening for any other bird calls. I think there's maybe a blue tit call in the distance. There's the base of that horse chestnut tree, and the next tree is a horse chestnut as well. This one, some of the candles are only just starting to come out, so again they're in different stages of growth. And there's the base of the horse chestnut. Then we have a youngish sycamore tree, fairly smooth, but an area of irregularity about 6 feet up. Don't know if that might indicate some sort of trauma at one stage, because after that it becomes smooth again. That one's just coming into leaf. Then we have a very young sycamore, which is further in leaf than the last tree. And this tree almost like scales. It is another type of sycamore, as you can see from the very first leaves that you can see. This one is only just starting to open up. So the sycamores, I don't think I've ever noticed this before. Some of them come out quite early, but that particular one is behind the oak tree that we have in the cemetery, because that is quite well leaved already. Here is another horse chestnut tree. And at my feet there's a broken egg which is completely white, so I think that's probably a wood pigeon. Could be a stock dove, of course. We do have both of those in the cemetery. Now the next tree has got these big sort of ridges, a deep ridge running right through. And this is a Lombardy poplar, so it's really, really tall. And there are 3 Lombardy poplars, one after each other. Oh, and there's a young sycamore has managed to grow in between. But the next tree is another Lombardy poplar. So you can only appreciate these really from a distance. I'll try and indicate the height. It's a really tall trees, and most of the branches turn upwards almost straight away, so giving them a very elongated appearance. And then here we have a variegated sycamore or maple, so this one has very yellow leaves. Don't know if you could hear, there's a herring gull. This cemetery has been invaded by herring gulls looking for worms in the last few weeks. A lot more herring gulls than normal. It's a bed we didn't really used to see on the ground here. You can hear the herring gull again. They would just usually fly over, but they must have found the cemetery a good source of food. That's just showing you the Lombardy poplar again. And a young sycamore here. And the next tree is a very knobbly sycamore, so quite unusual to have these growths on the side of the tree. This one's just coming into leaf. I can smell that beautiful balsam poplar, so that's just across the way. Here we have a mature horse chestnut, full of flowering candles. And then there's a tiny sycamore. And then we have quite a young lime tree. There's a series of young trees here, so these have probably been planted because the previous trees died or were cut down. And these are replacements. So the next one is another young sycamore, and another young sycamore after that. Just pan round to see if we can see anything different. So starting with the horse chestnut we've just been looking at, then we have some sort of purple or red maples. Then the next tree, which is quite tall, that is the balsam poplar that lets off the strong pleasant scent from the sticky gum of the emerging leaves. It smells better in the first thing in the morning. Sometimes later in the day you can't smell it at all. And then I think the next door tree is an ash, and it does look as though it's starting to come into leaf, which none of the other ashes are. And then you can see some white blossom, and that's a hawthorn. Next tree along the jail side is a lime tree, fairly young one again. And the bird that now nearest to the camera is a chaffinch. So that's the rollicking, descending bird that's supposed to either be a cricketer running to bowl, or you might be able to remember it as chip 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 cherry to wheel. Here, next tree after this is a large sycamore, which I think I've ignored while I was pointing out the chaffinch. The next tree is another horse chestnut. And just looking across where there's all that bare soil, that's a lime tree, and I know we've definitely seen 2 woodcock at one time, which I nearly managed to photograph when my nephew was really small, but I was pointing them out to him and they blended in so well that he couldn't see them. I spent too long trying to get him to see them, so I didn't get the camera ready in time. Getting nearer to the chaffinch. Then we have a mature lime tree. They really are. Their leaves are really beautiful at the moment. And the next tree is another horse chestnut again. This one's in flower, which shows quite well against the dark bark. And the chaffinch is fairly loud at the moment. This is a bird that when we arrived in 1969 was virtually non-existent here, and in the garden it has now taken the place of house sparrows. We lost house sparrows 5 years or more ago, and in the winter we can sometimes have to nearly 10 chaffinches. Now this really strongly marked bark is of an alder tree, and this is the one with the cones. I'll just try and get a bit closer to the cones. So they're very distinctive. Alders naturally grow near water, so this one has definitely been planted here because it isn't a natural place for an alder tree. And we're nearly at this particular edge of the cemetery, and there's just one last tree here. There's obviously the remains of an old tree that's been allowed to rot, and we have a quite unusual lime tree that's maybe been cut back at some time, and then lots of branches have started to emerge low down. Well, this is definitely not a small-leaved lime. There is another species called small-leaved lime, because as you can see from here, the leaves are really large on this one. And I'll just give you a view looking back. The chaffinch is still the most prominent singer. There is a very distant missel thrush. Okay, thanks for watching.